Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today because we're tackling something that is just fundamental to how we learn, how we grow, and honestly, how we shape the future. We're talking about customizing education to fit the complete, incredible spectrum of human learning. Because let's face it, human minds are wonderfully diverse, right? Yet so often, our systems try to treat them as if they're exactly the same. So today, we're going to dig into the research and the real strategies behind truly tailoring education to meet students exactly where they are. Okay, let's dive right into this. Does a one-size-fits-all classroom actually work? Think about the traditional uniform educational model. You've got a teacher standing at the front, delivering one lesson, at one speed, in one very specific way. But what happens to the kid who's falling behind, totally overwhelmed by the pace? Or flip it around, what happens to the highly creative child who is completely bored, whose mind is racing miles ahead, or just going in entirely different directions? When we force every unique mind into a standard mold, we literally risk losing the incredible potential resting on both ends of that spectrum. So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at supporting the struggling student. Second, we'll define the creative child. Third, we're going to identify creative traits. And finally, we'll talk about nurturing that classroom creativity. Part 1. Supporting the struggling student. When a child is falling behind academically, it's incredibly easy to just look at their test scores and, well, blame a lack of effort. But the research paints a much more poignant picture. Often, we are looking at children who are, as the sources put it, emotionally starved and mentally perturbed. They desperately need proper love, affection, and security. Backwardness in school is frequently tied to miserable handicaps caused by poverty, ill health, and other severe social maladies. Before we can even begin to fix a math or reading delay, we really have to recognize the very real, heavy environmental burdens these students are carrying into the classroom every single day. Now, what's really interesting about this is how these crucial interventions organize brilliantly into two distinct categories: environmental support versus concrete academic restructuring. On the environmental side, we're talking about things like regular medical checkups, readjusting the home and school dynamic, and actively controlling the negative peer factors that can really color a student's vision of life. But environment alone just isn't enough. On the academic side, these students might actually need special classes, maybe a shorter, simpler curriculum based on concrete living experiences, and they often need special coaching that relies heavily on drill, repetition, and practice. It's really a dual-pronged approach, right? You heal the environment and you simplify the academics. All right, let's look at the other side of the coin with part 2, defining the creative child. So what is a creative child? Basically, it's one who creates, discovers, or produces new ideas. But it's not just about pulling a completely new invention out of thin air. Crucially, it is also about reshaping what is already known. A highly creative child is fundamentally curious. They're resourceful, flexible, and so open-minded. They look at the established world, the rules, the building blocks, the established concepts, simply as raw material, just waiting to be rearranged into something entirely fresh. To really anchor this concept, let's bring in a titan of established psychology. B.F. Skinner notes that a creative thinker is one who explores new ideas and makes new observations, new predictions, and new inferences. I absolutely love this framing because it shows that creativity isn't just about, painting a pretty picture. It's a profound cognitive process. It's about actively exploring the unknown, predicting what might happen if you change a variable, and inferring entirely new conclusions from just everyday observations. And then, if we look at Spearman's definition, we see creativity described as the power of the human mind to create new contents by transforming relations and generating new correlates. Okay, that sounds a bit academically dense, doesn't it? But let's break that complex psychological concept down into plain English. What Spearman is really saying is that creative minds are absolute masters at connecting seemingly unrelated dots. They see a relationship between, say, a bird in flight and the shape of a wing on an aeroplane, and they generate a new correlate. They take isolated facts and mash them up to generate entirely new, brilliant ideas. Which brings us to part 3, identifying creative characteristics. So the crucial point is knowing what these traits actually look like in real life. Creative kids demonstrate deep originality, for sure, but they also have this incredible intuition and a surprisingly high powers concentration when something actually captures their alertness. They're highly sensitive to problems. They're the first to notice when things don't quite work, right? But my absolute favorite trait here is the ability to transfer learning between situations. Like, imagine a kid learning about fractions and equal shares in math class, and then immediately taking that concept outside to creatively and fairly resolve a complicated playground dispute over a game. That is transferring learning. That is a divergent, diversified imagination at work. But we have to remember that identifying these incredible traits isn't passive. You can't just wait around for a student to declare their creativity. Teachers and parents must actively use non-testing devices. This means keen, intentional observation, conducting interviews with a child, and utilizing rating scales or checklists. Spotting divergent thinkers really requires adults to be vigilant and entirely present in watching how a child approaches their environment. Of course, sometimes everyday observation just isn't quite enough, or maybe we need a more formal baseline. In those cases, there are authoritative, standardized tools available to help quantify a child's creative potential. Tests like the Minnesota Test of Creative Thinking or the Wallach and Kogan Creativity Instruments can give educators a really solid, scientifically backed lens through which to understand a student's unique capacity for divergent thought. And finally, Part 4, Nurturing Classroom Creativity. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how we do that, using a stark elimination technique. We have to actively build opportunities for divergent thinking, originality, and artistic expression. But building is only half the job. We must ruthlessly eliminate the blockers: rigid habits of work, authoritarian attitudes from parents and teachers, anxiety, and a heavy overemphasis on school marks. You literally cannot foster creativity if you are allowing these blockers to dominate the classroom. Ultimately, the research makes it super clear. Students should be given full freedom for the development of their imagination. Providing materials for artistic expression and allowing for total imaginative freedom isn't just some nice-to-have bonus activity to kill time on a Friday afternoon. It is the ultimate synthesis of customizing education for the creative mind. It's about giving them the space and the resources to transform relations and generate those new ideas we talked about earlier. So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I really want to leave you with a provocative question to spark some reflection on your own educational methods, whether that's at home or in a school. Look at the students in your life and ask yourself, are you building a customized environment tailored to every unique mind, offering concrete support for those struggling and expansive freedom for those creating? Or are you enforcing a standard that limits their imagination? The future really depends on how we answer that question. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this vital topic, and keep looking for ways to nurture the brilliant, unique minds around you.